With the emergence of analog horror, there's been a collective of game developers that have emulated and transformed the horror into a different media: video games. These video games take the old VHS tape aesthetic to a whole new, unnerving level. For example, the Group 864 training program, created by Joe Capo, is a great example of the newer, anomaly-focused analog horror games. The premise of this game is that you're in a group called Group 864, obviously, right? You play as a Tier 3 worker that undergoes job training for this world. The training consists of 5 lessons: awareness, being careful, dealing with stress, recreation, and hacking. You explore through the game in a style that's equivalent to the training programs you partake in before you start a new job. But this job is strange in the fact that you're not training for an ordinary McDonald's job or something, but you are being prepared to work in an environment for studying, containing, observing, and learning about anomalies. The anomalies you study cover a large array of creatures, like shadow-like humans, ghosts, and some creatures even resembling individuals that look like you and I. What starts off as a job training, however, is slowly changed by the uncanny nature of the game's atmosphere. The first lesson you go through in Group 864's training program is a perfect beginning to the sneaky intentions of the game's atmosphere. A prompt starts off by telling you, when you see something unknown, don't approach it. Instead, report it. Report any strange noises immediately as well. To not let anything sneak behind you, you must constantly check your surroundings behind you. Lastly, when you see an anomaly, don't break eye contact unless instructed to. The next part after this, however, gets truly disturbing. You are brought over to a safety quiz to check to see if you've been absorbing all the information you've read so far. Then it tells you to play the audio. The audio plays what seems to be a man logging in that he's seen an anomaly while in Antarctica, with horns on its head and fangs. However, he says he made the mistake of breaking eye contact with the creature and has lost sight of it. He then proclaims that he is attempting to re-establish eye contact. Then you hear the sound of something running. After that, you hear a loud yell from an anomaly and scream, presumably from the man who is recording this as an audio. You hear a mix of screeching, fighting, bashing and tearing, while the anomaly screeches in the background. His body tearing, him pleading, and yelling at the top of his lungs is played for the remaining half of the audio recording. After the recording is finished, you are asked to please answer the question the test asks. It states, what did the operative do wrong? You are given 3 choices. A. He discharged his weapon. B. He was too loud. C. He didn't keep eye contact. The correct answer being C. He didn't keep eye contact. Then the test goes right back to the program. The mood is normal again, telling you the unnecessary number of lives lost due to people not following procedure. Almost as if it never played an actual audio of a man losing his life to one of the anomalies he discovered. This game's atmosphere, throwing you from ordinary job training to disturbing media of anomalies, is a stark contrast from The Complex. The Complex found footage is a game exploring the uncanny realm of the back rooms through a VHS camera perspective, traversing through unreal designs of architecture. Unlike typical analog horror games in this genre, the game doesn't utilize cheap jump scares or other easy horror tropes like it, but rather creates an unsettling atmosphere through the fact that you're not sure if there even is a monster within the game or not. Players wander through randomly generated dream structures, crawling odd spaces, and undefinable, uneasy backroom areas. For instance, the starting area you're in is like an office space, a yellow square corporate area. What's strange about it is that the proportions are just a little bit incorrect, which makes it discomforting. There's no doors, but the areas where doors would normally be are replaced with openings that are slightly bigger than they're supposed to be. The lights are dim, yellow, often not being enough light to see even the area right in front of your face. Some rooms are slightly more yellow, which makes them feel more inviting. There's a red room with red lights that feel more alert, and there's green and white rooms that are almost inviting but lead to nowhere. Exploring through the first area's weird assortment of rooms makes you feel quite lonely, but need not to worry because one of the most eerie parts of the game reminds you that you shouldn't rely too much on the safety of loneliness. Wham! A trapdoor opening up from the wall, which introduces the horrifying truth that the walls of the back rooms are actually inhabited. So the game makes you question yourself, are you really alone in these rooms? The realistic environment through the scratching, movement sounds and cracking of the walls has you constantly pondering if you're with someone else. The realistic part of the environment is curious in the fact that it is the main focal point of the horror game. Within the communities, it's been discussed. Forums like Reddit and YouTube comments indicating this claim. My experience was completely different from Mark's, a YouTube commenter says. He continues, I saw rooms he never saw rooms that he saw, found elevators where he didn't, and vice versa. All saw them in a completely different order. The cube-like room he saw near the end was one of the first I saw. A Redditor also says, I've played it a few times. For being a free little backroom game, it's genuinely one of the best looking and most atmospheric games I've played in my life. Walked down a certain hallway and started hearing a choir singing Ave Maria from down the hallway. You notice consistently the focus points of the game is its environment, which is chiefly different from most analog horror games. Hell, most horror games in general, where the main part of the experience is the monster, the one that's stalking you to chase you, which brings us perfectly to The Closing Shift. The Closing Shift is a Japanese analog horror game where you play as a girl experiencing something strange happening during the time working at a coffee shop. It's known for its immersive atmospheric experience and photorealistic graphics and glassy appearance. Throughout the shifts though, our protagonist realises there is something very wrong with this coffee shop. Going through an amalgamation of different interactions with customers, we put together a story of what's really going on around this neighbourhood. Stalking incidents. But it's just your average coffee shop. It's safe to work there, right? Wrong, because it actually turns out that you're the next stalking victim. It's hard to notice from the fact that the game is very subtle about its atmosphere. The atmosphere of the game is a glossy, clean texture. It has an old film look to the game and slight static to it as well. It's a very unique look for its type of game. The game gives the first-hand experience of being a Starbucks barista by making you remember the orders of the customers coming in, going to the back of the store to relearn how to make their order, and then coming back. The music is classic and peaceful. It makes you feel delighted to be playing the game. You clean the floors at the end of the night and reorganise the shelves. You deal with quirky customers, groups of people coming in and ordering confusing bulk orders, customers hitting on you, and taking out the trash at the end of the night. This all seems like a typical simulator game, but there's a lot of eerie occurrences that go on that make you wonder if this game is so typical after all. Much like the first game we covered, the Group 864 training program, the Closing Shift game mostly seems typical, but sometimes it gets bold, pokes its chest out, and reminds us that you are indeed still playing a horror game, with its disturbing undertones, like when music cuts off right at an inappropriate moments, just to make you feel the tension at the end of the night. At the beginning of the game, when the private detective comes in to order his normal latte, he advises you to close the store early because there's stalkers in the area and out of your own safety to prevent you from being a target. After this, when he leaves, the lights abruptly turn off. The turning off of the lights and leaving items on the floor makes you anticipate a jump scare. It never comes. The anticipation is what is most scary about this game, even though it does have legitimate scares within it. With 3 different endings as well, you have 3 different separate opportunities to not become another one of the game's stalked and missing persons, like Cave Crawler. This analog game is entirely centred around missing people, but particularly what has happened to these missing people. You find them throughout the game when you discover their final fates. Available on Steam and itch.io, Cave Crawl is a short horror game where players pilot a drone into a cave and encounter unsettling discoveries. It's part of a series by Technomancy Studios involving missing people in a cave system. You play a puzzle game of finding the bodies, scanning them, getting little bits of information on them until you finally complete the objective of finding all the people. You're first off in a cave where there's pillars of rocks around you and it's dark. The objective is to find the missing person. There's clearly a camera on whatever device you're using by the framing on each side of the square. Turning left and right is choppy, stiff, like you're manipulating a machine. Your robot has many different abilities, if many were like 3. You can zoom in and out with the camera lens on your tech, which is used to observe objects and other things as well from a far distance. You can scan objects you see on your way traversing through the cave for a DNA trail. For instance, a missing boot and a backpack. The robot you are using will then give you information on the thing you just scanned. Lastly, there's a motion detecting system that lets you know whether something has either moved around the vicinity of you or moved around within your space of vision. What's moving in your vicinity, you might ask? Well, that's the whole point of why Rockwell Mining Group, which is who you play as, has developed a newly created drone that is dispatched into the depths of the cave system. The storyline revolves around the Scooby-Doo mystery of first finding the missing individuals from your company with that cave, and figuring out how they died, because you do find all the bodies of your fellow co-workers, dead of course. You can scan the individual items you're looking for to slowly reveal more and more information about the victims. The further you go through the experience, the more the drone you use to gather information around you starts to say more peculiar things. To give you an idea, at the beginning of the game, when you scan the lifeless corpses of the victims you're gathering intel on, the robot says, "You found the missing person." After you scan the body of the first man penetrated by the crystal below him. Then later on, the second mission, when you're scanning these same bodies, it says, "You found the crystal." Then eventually their legal names, but the drone acting strangely isn't even the real monster within the game, which is unlike Anatomy. Anatomy is an analog horror game created by Kitty Horror Show, immersing players in an eerie adventure of a deserted house. The game starts in an empty and abandoned home, inviting players to investigate and unravel its mysteries. As players travel the house, they collect cassette tapes containing philosophical ideas of the insights on domestic architecture, ideas on how the house is the metaphorical equivalent to the human body, and how that's even the case, adding layers to the haunting atmosphere. The game leverages cassette tapes as a storytelling medium, evoking a sense of unease through the narrative delivered in each recording, through its minimalist design and clever use of sound. This game, like The Backrooms, shares the strangeness in that both of these horror experiences, you aren't exactly sure who or what, or even if there is a monster in the game. This makes Anatomy unique, in that it doesn't have to rely on a monster chasing you throughout the house to make the game unnerving, so it relies on atmosphere to keep the game scary within your mind. The game's atmosphere is quite fresh for its time. As you explore the seemingly empty house, there's a constant feeling of uneasiness the game gives you. From the psychiatrist of some sort that explains the human being's instinct to want to live in a secure house, to the VHS static that shows you through your screen, to the darkness that surrounds the interior of the building, gives a feeling of uneasiness, almost as if someone is constantly watching you. As you go through the game and gather the tapes, you listen to the speaker explain the psychological importance of the house to the human. After he's done speaking, you are told where to find the next tape, usually to the area of the house that was analogous to the human body. For instance, on the 4th tape, he explains how the living room is functionally like the heart. Then after he tells you this, the game tells you the next tape is located in the living room. The 6th tape speaks about the living room, so next tape will be found in the living room, etc. This gives the feeling of disobedience when you explore other areas of the house without it being discussed by the speaker on the cassette. The area wasn't yet spoken about, but you chose to explore it anyway. This is only the beginning of the game's atmosphere, because it's only getting started once the game decides to crash on you. I appreciate you watching our whole video through, and if you didn't crash during it, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and let us know what type of videos you'd want to discuss next on Jason Disturbo.